Yeah, we do actually have a World Cup revenue calculator. It's a rough estimate of your sort of the income that you can get. Anyone can try it out.
I can give you my zip
Okay,
if that works.
we
I'll
can try it.
bleep it out on the podcast. Yeah, it's
Let's see here. Yep, Brooklyn, New York. This says here the expected earnings for hosting in New York from June 12th to July 12th, $2,800 to $4,200 on average here. That's the potential earnings that you can make.
Well, there were some worrying signs for hotels around the World Cup. A new report is showing that hotels are not getting the bump that they expected for bookings for during the summer's World Cup. It seems like a lot of the issues that are surrounding this World Cup, from immigration to geopolitics to high ticket prices, are really affecting people thinking about coming to the US for this World Cup. So those projections showed that among a lot of hotels, revenue is only really going to increase slightly this summer compared to the huge kind of spike that they expected, really showing that they can't rely on World Cup visitors alone, which was the calculus beforehand. There's a quote from the report that says, hotels are now treating this more like a high demand summer period than a once in a generation windfall. The focus of this episode is not on hotels, but short-term rentals, better known as Airbnb, essentially. And VRBO is another company that does that. These really shot up in popularity about a decade ago. And there's been this constant battle between the hotels and the Airbnbs. It looks like generally hotels win the battle for travelers. There was another report from Upgraded Points last year that said 62% of travelers prefer hotels and 38% prefer Airbnbs and short-term rentals. The ones who do like short-term rentals like it because they offer more space, more privacy. They handle bigger groups better because often you have a bigger house with more rooms, more beds. You can have things like kitchen amenities so you can cook at home, maybe save some money that way. Now, AirDNA, which is a company not affiliated at all with Airbnb, is a data analytics company, and they are kind of the go-to source for data around the short-term rental industry. Their customers might be hosts or property managers or real estate investors who want to see what areas of the country and the world short-term rentals are popular, where they're spiking, why they're spiking, everything down to daily income rate, to occupancy rate, to trends on seasonality, trends on market demand in new growth areas. And AirDNA have a brand new tool that they've launched on their website around the World Cup. They have a table that shows every single match and every single location and the percentage demand for that location based on that match over last year. So potentially showing how much these matches are spiking interest in short-term rentals over a normal season like last year. You can also put in your zip code or your address into the tool and show how much you can earn potentially by using your home to be rented out to people traveling here for the World Cup. So I got into all that with Bram Gallagher, who's an economist at AirDNA. So we discussed some of the trends, some of the areas that are attracting most reservations because of a certain match or a certain team. And stick around till the end because we also discussed just the importance of travel and why something like short-term rentals can be such a way to connect with our fellow human beings. That's something I believe in a lot. I've been lucky to do some traveling during my time in the US and often have done Airbnbs and short-term rentals and just gotten to know people, real people that you wouldn't have been able to get to know otherwise, seeing some parts of the country you wouldn't have been able to see otherwise because it's maybe not where your corporate hotel would be located. It's off the beaten track. I've stayed in, a rural farm in Vermont. I've stayed in a cabin in a canyon in Colorado, And I think with everything going on in the US right now, having such a unique experience with a host can be a way of really getting away from the top line news headlines and finding out about real people and how kind of welcoming they can be. I will say the Americans are some of the most hospitable people I've met, and I think a lot of international travelers would maybe be positively surprised to find that. This has in no way been endorsed or sponsored by Airbnb. Those are my own feelings. And actually, early data is showing that some of these short-term rentals are not experiencing the same concerns that hotels are for a variety of reasons. A report from February from Airbnb said that they're seeing a 110% increase for host cities over last year for bookings this summer. So I won't give too much more away. Here is my chat with AirDNA's Bram Gallagher.
So, just to introduce myself, so Bram Gallagher, I'm the Director of Economics and Forecasting at AirDNA. I started hospitality research almost a decade ago, maybe even more than a decade ago at this point, with CBRE, a big commercial real estate broker, and I was doing all of their hotel stuff. So, a lot of fun to forecast. I think 2020, that was a real fun year to do hospitality forecast. But
What happened?
in
No,
20,
just kidding.
yeah, just there's a few things. But my boss, he was a great manager, and he had been working with me this whole time was at CBRE. But he noticed that just incredible dynamism in the short-term rental industry was occurring right after the COVID outbreak. So he started working with AirDNA. They're pretty much the best firm out there for short-term rental data. We've been collecting data the longest. We've got global data for all the major platforms. He started working on that. He needed some help, so he invited me to come along, and I switched as well from hotels to short-term rentals. So what we do is we scrape the web, all of these listings from, say, Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com. We try to get all these listings, each listing once a day, that we can get good visibility on. Are they available? What are they charging? We can see when they are unavailable, so we can say, well, is this a block or is this someone actually reserving this? And so it's very detailed data. We do this to provide competitive intelligence for operators. So our mom and pop customer being a small operator, maybe between 1 and 5 of these sorts of listings that they either own or manage, and they just want to see what are my neighbors doing. What is the market doing? What are the hot spots to invest in? What are the prices I should be charging? That sort of thing.
And just to be clear, are you affiliated, just because of your name and everything, are you affiliated with Airbnb or any of the short-term rental services?
Yeah, I do get that question a lot. So AirDNA, that name was thought of, it was quite a long time ago. Air was a real hot word, so the letter I was a pretty hot word for a little while when Apple came out with that. And, E was the one before that. Air was kind of popular back in 2014, 2015 when this started. But no, we are not affiliated in any way. In fact, one of the big advantages that we have, and one of the reasons why Airbnb likes what we're doing, is that as a big public company, they can't really update people with the sort of fresh data all the time, right? They've got public disclosures that they can make. Now, we're completely unaffiliated with them. They don't send us any data. We don't have any deals with them to get data from them or anything like that. All of this data is produced completely independently. So, we can share pretty much as much as we want. The nice thing about these listings, too, this is all publicly available data. So there's not huge privacy concerns as well with the data that we have.
So, Bram, I guess just to start with, I mean, what are your top line findings around rentals for the World Cup?
So this is a big question.
Yeah. Thought I'd start big.
Yeah. We think that we'll see if this pans out, because we've had a lot of big events before, but we're thinking that the U.S. World Cup in 2026 is going to be the biggest short-term rental event that we have ever seen. So even bigger than the Paris Olympics, even bigger than several Super Bowls put together, really, because it takes place over 2 months. So there's lots of time there. It's also taking place over many, many cities in 3 countries. So to say, we're really excited to see this. And there's a lot of opportunities for people to rent their homes, to be able to provide this hospitality experience. And something else, too, that we really like, and this is what we've seen in some past events also, is that generally you've got hotels providing hospitality in cities, and that's good for when, business as usual. But when something like the World Cup comes into town, you need more capacity. And short-term rentals are really good at being able to provide short-term capacity, because these can activate and deactivate pretty quickly, depending on the sort of the demand. So it's very flexible. And we think that that is going to be very advantageous to cities. We would hope that these cities would take advantage of short-term rentals when they host. And we've already started to see some, really exciting booking trends for the period over which the World Cup is taking place. So if I were to look at individual markets, there are some that are booking way, way ahead of where they were this time last year. All of the markets that we're seeing are seeing pretty sizable bumps, and some of them are, really eye-watering, particularly in the Mexican cities, the host cities. We've seen incredible performance turnout for those. Guadalajara, for example. I'm just looking at, say, the group stage, just for example, but some of these, so the Korea versus Mexico match, we're seeing demand up 1,000%. So 10 times the listing demand as of right now as we did this time last year for the same dates. So that's really explosive. But even in some of the American cities, we're also seeing, large increases. One of the biggest and most exciting matches, I think, is going to be in Miami, Brazil versus Scotland. When the draw was announced back in December, all the Scottish games really blew up. It was really exciting to see how much the Scottish fans were excited about coming to the U.S. for the World Cup. Now, this is Miami. And this is for June 24th, right? So this is prime vacation time when you go to Miami, and their demand is up around 500%. So we're seeing, 6 times the demand already just for that day than we saw this time last year. The window is closing in rapidly. We've been following this for the last 3 months, a little bit longer, but 3 months in earnest, because that's when the draw was. And as we get closer and closer, I expected those numbers to start converging, but they're not. They're diverging. So we're actually seeing increases and more excitement as we approach the date. It's really widespread. There's a lot of different markets, and just really excited to see a lot of the sort of additional demand short-term rentals be able to accommodate.
Those examples are really interesting. The Scotland example and the Guadalajara example. Are there any other maybe surprising or intriguing examples? Particular markets that are really up or looking pretty vibrant.
All of these markets are doing pretty well. There are some that are not doing maybe as strongly as some others. New York City, despite, being so close to where the final is being held, of course, it's got really intense regulations on short-term rentals. So, if you wanted to stay in New York City, you got to rent the place out for at least a month. So while we are seeing, boosts of around 30 to 40%, and that's usually really good, it's not as high as some of these other cities. So, for example, Fort Worth, we're regularly seeing 4 or 5 times, 400 or 500% higher demand in, say, Fort Worth. Dallas, around 300 or 400% as well. So those matches are really, really well attended. The matches in Arlington, that is. I'm in Atlanta, and, we had the Club World Cup last year, and some of the attendance was a little disappointing here and there. Atlanta in particular was pretty bad. I've been doing some analysis since we just talked about the sort of the distance between short-term rentals and the venues, and that seems to have an effect. So, for example, if you look right there at Arlington, you've got this huge clutch of short-term rentals right next to the stadium, but not a whole lot of hotels until you get a little bit farther out. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, it's the exact opposite. You've got all of the hotels that are located very close to Mercedes-Benz. And short-term rentals farther out than that. And yeah, we're still seeing, so it's not as big in Atlanta, but we're still seeing really nice demand numbers compared to, say, the Club World Cup. So we're still up around between 150 to 200% for all these group stage matches as well, even in Atlanta. So Boston is doing very similarly. Of course, the Mexican cities, and also Kansas City, which is, it was kind of unexpected sort of venue, but it's really exciting for the people that live in that area. I know there's a lot of people planning on taking vacations going through Route 66 and going to end up in Kansas City by the end of it. But they're seeing, demand spikes between 300 and 500%. So very, very nice. So especially for Algeria, Argentina on June the 16th, that game, of course, Argentina, everybody loves to see Messi play. We've had a lot of Argentinians coming to Miami to see him play on the Miami team, but the Argentinians are very comfortable coming to the U.S. now to see soccer, and they love to do it. We're seeing that game up 500% in Kansas City. So they're gonna experience sort of the interior of the U.S., probably a place that Argentinians don't usually travel. It's usually the coast that they like to hit up, L.A. and Miami, but they're really excited about the game too. So it's really widely spread out. there is a lot of benefits to, I think for all of these cities, there's going to be a lot of traffic, and it's really, again, there's not really any real slow or laggardly markets that I can see outside of, again, there's sort of regulatory issues. So San Francisco can increase its demand so much. New York City also has some pretty strong regulations, but outside of that, we're really seeing a really big boost in demand.
Just from browsing your site, it looks like some of the kind of outskirts or suburban areas are really blowing up too, from Galveston to Fort Lauderdale to kind of Jersey City. Is that a sign of people maybe not getting rooms in the city, or is it a sign of they maybe want to tack on, like a little holiday in Fort Lauderdale while they're there kind of thing?
No, absolutely. I think this is, for the examples that you mentioned, very much, or let's extend our holiday. So, there's several games. You might not have tickets to all the games, but there's several games in all of these venues. So you may attend one or two of them, and you've got some time in between. What are you going to do? You might go and visit Fort Lauderdale. So we are seeing, even though that Fort Lauderdale isn't hosting anything, its proximity to Miami is making it popular. We're even hearing about, of course, some people scheduling a Disney vacation in Orlando. So making that journey, which is, it's not a short, not a short drive, but if you've already flown across an ocean, maybe it's not so bad. Galveston also, really, it's a beautiful leisure destination. It regularly hosts lots of cruises coming in. We're thinking that, you're going to be going to Texas for those Arlington games or for the Houston matches or something like that, you're close enough to Galveston where you can maybe make an additional trip there as well. So it's a really nice place to stay. Some others, that might be happening, LA and Las Vegas, we're kind of sort of paying close attention to that. You might think about, doing a bit of gambling after your matches or something like that. In fact, if I were to look at just sort of an array of the length of stay for sort of these reservations that are being made over there, you can see a pretty distinct pattern. There are several markets where people are staying, not just 1 or 2 nights, but 5 nights, 10 nights, 11 plus nights, even a few weeks. So Mexico City, Jersey City, Newark, Los Angeles, Miami, and San Francisco, all of those markets that they have really high levels of very long stays. So I'm expecting that, these people are making the most of their trip. They're going to be seeing some soccer, but they're also going to be enjoying the cities that they're in, and even traveling to neighboring cities.
Do you have a sense of how much people can be renting their places out for? I guess it depends so much on the market and the size of the property. I mean, maybe you can look up my zip code. I don't know. I have a 1-bed in Brooklyn. If I give you my zip code, would you be able to look that up?
Yeah, we do actually have a World Cup revenue calculator. It's a rough estimate of your sort of the income that you can get. Anyone can try it out. Let me see. There's also this dashboard as well. If you want to search AirDNA World Cup dashboard too, I can never remember what the URL is, but whenever I Google that, it's the first sort of list. But that's a nice website that has all the performance data. And on that page, you'll find this sort of calculator. So you've got a 1-bedroom, and let's see, I can punch in.
I can give you my zip if that works. I'll bleep it out on the podcast. Yeah, it's nice and easy.
Okay. Let's see here. Yep, Brooklyn, New York. And this says here, the expected earnings for hosting in New York from June 12th to July 12th, depending on, your particular home. But this is for a 1-bedroom home, which it's New York. It's an apartment. $2,800 to $4,200 on average here. That's the potential earnings that you can make
for the whole stretch, or
making it available from there then to then.
Yeah.
Now, of course, New York is a little bit different because now, as you know, there's not a whole lot of short-term rentals that are available in New York. It's a fun calculator because you can put in your own personal address and sort of see, what's going on.
Do you get a sense anecdotally that people are thinking about renting out their places now? They're like, oh, I can earn a few bucks and maybe go on vacation and, go somewhere else for a month.
I think so, because if you're not interested in soccer and you're in one of these cities, the city's going to be swamped anyway, right? So there's, I think, a good opportunity to finance your own vacation with somebody else's, which is quite alluring. But yeah, also just to make some money, to experiment with it. If you haven't tried short-term rental before and you've been interested in it, this is a really great opportunity to sort of get into the market, see how it treats you. I've been looking at the changes in the booked rate. Rates are up a bit. They're not skyrocketing to astronomical levels, which I like, because it really tells me that it's going to be sort of a popular kind of destination where lots of people are going to be able to rent places. But there's some good premiums. Say 35%, maybe over the sort of usual rate from last year. And in some of these markets, it's even higher than that. So, Kansas City, we're having a 50% increase on that June 16th date. So that's pretty high. So it might be something to look into. And you can look from weekend to weekend to see, well, if I'm only going to rent out one weekend, which one is the one that people are really clamoring for?
It seems like a good deal for the hosts at the moment with the demand so high, but obviously one of the talking points of this World Cup is how expensive it is even to get tickets, and then all the dynamic pricing. Does it look good for traveling fans? Are they getting a better deal than hotels? Are hotels looking pretty similar? How does it look for the fans?
Well, it depends on the kind of group that you're traveling with. That's one of the advantages that short-term rentals have, is that while their rates tend to be higher on average than hotel rooms, they often have multiple bedrooms. So, for instance, if you're traveling with a group of, say, 4 or 5 people, instead of renting 4 or 5 hotel rooms, you can rent a single short-term rental. So there is definitely a way to save. I think that's one of the big trends that we've seen over this last year, is people looking to save money by traveling in groups. And this is a great way to do it, particularly if your short-term rental is convenient to the stadium. And again, those rates, they've gone up a bit, but they haven't skyrocketed. We're not seeing 800% higher rates. We're seeing, 15, 35% bonuses, 50% bonuses, or premiums, I should say, in the high demand days. But I think that's still rather reasonable for the traveler. They're not going to feel like they're being gouged as much, which is good, because the tickets, I hear, are extremely expensive right now. So travelers are looking to save where they can. And I think that's demonstrated in some of the lower price listings getting snapped up very quickly.
Do you have a sense of where these travelers are coming from? Are they domestic travelers? Are most of them from abroad? Do you have that sort of data?
We don't have the data for the people coming to the World Cup just yet. We do track origin data for travelers, but we get it from guest reviews. So, of course, they got to stay there and sort of leave a review first before we can really get visibility into that. But on the other hand, we can say, well, what has international travel been doing? And what are the countries that are most comfortable traveling to the U.S., even in this past year? We do know that international travel has been down significantly since the April announcement of the tariffs. Sort of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So there has been a little bit less international travel. I have noticed that domestic travel over this last year has increased to make up for it. But the World Cup is a very special event, and I think it is going to be a lot of international travelers, more so than we've seen in the past year, for example. So we're going to be seeing those numbers jump up a lot. Overall, international travel down maybe 10, 15% to short-term rentals. But some of these markets haven't seen diminishment in short-term rental international travel. So Miami is a good example. It hasn't seen a significant drop in international travel over the last year. San Jose, Palo Alto, also the same. Dallas and Fort Worth have actually seen increases to international travel over the last year. So I don't think that it's going to be too big of an obstacle for these particular markets to attract international travelers for the World Cup. And if I was to look at, the different countries how that has changed over the past year, for example, Argentina is I think the biggest increase. So even as most international travel has diminished, Argentina is still really interested in travel. The short-term rentals has increased about a quarter year over year over this last 12 months. So that's a really positive sign to see. India, we're also seeing more travel from. Brazil, we're also seeing more travel from. So these are great places for fans to come from as well. And some of these individual markets as well are also seeing, lots of interest. So I wouldn't have guessed this, but the number one international origin market for Jersey City, Newark. What's your guess?
Brazil.
That's a pretty good guess. It's on the top 5, certainly. But for short-term rentals, it's France. France is the number one for Jersey City, Newark. I would have never guessed. But the French seem to enjoy Jersey City and Newark. Perhaps to travel into to New York City, and there's no short-term rentals in New York City hardly after the sort of 2023 regulations. Not only are they the number one, but travel to Jersey City, New York from French over the last year has not diminished at all. It's very slightly increased, in fact. So, there are some matches that are occurring there that I think they're going to be very interested in as well. Yeah, Brazil is the fifth most. So France making up about 13% of the total international guests. Brazil about 8%. So, pretty close. And Brazil also increasing its travel to Jersey City, Newark over the past year, increasing its share of travel, I should say, over the past year. So that's sort of interesting and thrilling to see. If I was to look at Miami, as I said, Miami also increasing its international share of visitors to short-term rentals. Argentina, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Colombia, Mexico. So lots of Spanish-speaking nations, really comfortable going to Miami. Each one of those that I just mentioned has pretty strongly increased their share of international visitation to Miami over the last year as well. In LA too, Argentina has really been going to LA much more frequently, and Mexico as well. So many of these countries that I've mentioned are ones that do have a big interest in soccer. So Argentina, we know that they love soccer. They're crazy about it. Mexico the same way. So I think that the international travel has been difficult this last year, but the World Cup is going to be enough of an impetus for a lot more international travel than we've seen.
You mentioned that the tariffs, and then of course there's been immigration issues, visa bans, and geopolitical issues. I mean, I was back in Europe over Christmas, and a lot of my friends are saying, no, I'm not going to America right now. So I suppose it's hard to judge what the demand would have been had these problems not happened, right? It's hard to compare if it would have been even greater at this point. Do you have a sense of that? And do you also have a sense of whether there's been an uptick in Canada and Mexico because people maybe don't want to come to the US?
Well, that may be, the uptick to Canada and Mexico. We may have seen some evidence of that. I do know that the Mexican venues are very, very, very popular. On the other hand, there is a big domestic group of fans, and there's some really good games that are occurring in these venues also. We did have, sort of some cartel violence a little while back, and, we were very concerned. We did see initially a big, strong uptick in cancellations and short-term rentals. However, it has since gone back down, with President Sheinbaum making assurances that the World Cup is going to be safe and doing a lot of work to ensure that people are confident about that. So, yeah, I think that those two markets are going to be strong. And, the international relations with the U.S. right now, there's some difficulties, particularly now with, our aggression in Iran. If that could spiral into a larger regional conflict, and if, energy prices continue to skyrocket, there's definitely headwinds that we would expect. I choose to remain optimistic. I think we can still find a way out of this. We do know that the tariffs have gone down and settled into a higher than they were before, but not maybe as drastic as people were afraid of in April of last year. So that may help. The euro is still pretty strong against the dollar, so there is also the sort of affordability issue, which does help for European folks visiting. And we've got some diehard fans that they will follow their team wherever they go. So yes, I definitely think there are risks, and things could have been a little bit more smooth. On the other hand, I think there's still a lot of room for optimism.
Do you have a sense that people are still waiting on booking their travel, or is it the type of thing? I suppose it's hard with tickets, right? Because there's so many different lotteries and people are waiting on whether they can maybe get a cheaper ticket. Do you have a sense of when people are booking?
We did see a really big bump after the December draw. That was to be expected, and it has been accelerating since then. However, there hasn't been a single sort of event since that final draw that's really caused a spike, I guess, in additional reservations. There's churn as far as there's slightly elevated cancellation rates for those dates. The most popular listings that we've seen so far as cancellation policies go would be the most flexible listings are the most likely to have been booked, it seems so far. So, I think there is kind of a wait and see for ticket availability, for, what's going to happen with this sort of international situation. Which cities do I want to go to, and which group can I bring with me? So there is a little bit of uncertainty. I would say that, for big events like these, especially when you've got to fly on an airplane, we usually see long lead times. So I'm expecting those reservations will continue to accelerate, though, because we've seen early reservations. Even still, we're at sort of the point where reservations are going to be picking up again and continuing to accelerate into the event day. And that's a pretty common pattern. We see, a spike of very early bookings, a little bit of a lull, and then this acceleration towards the date.
I suppose any advice for people traveling and looking for a short-term rental, tips on maybe saving a buck or how to go about looking?
Well, one of the things that, especially if you're coming from Europe, make sure that you have a map with a legend and, get it translated into kilometers if you got to, because distances in the U.S. are a little different than they are in Europe. Public transportation, maybe not as well developed in a lot of these places as well. So, figure out how you're going to get around. That's important. But, once you do that, I think then a lot of different possibilities for lodging are going to open up, right? So if you're going to be, say, renting a car, taking, say, Uber or one of these rideshare places, then, you've got a lot of flexibility as to where you can stay. And there's a lot of really interesting short-term rentals that can house many, many people to check out. So think off the beaten path, I guess. Maybe look around to see what all the options are, and plan the trip as not just visiting for a particular game, but think about all of, I guess, the things that you might be able to enjoy. That's going to give you more value too for your dollar, which is what everybody I think is searching for at this point. Or your euro, I should say. More value for your euro.
Right, exactly. Well, we still have the mighty pound, I suppose, but yeah.
Yes. It is going to be a really big event. And to your point, I think it's going to maybe be a opportunity for maybe a little bit of this international rapprochement. Things have been kind of dicey. Even here in the U.S., some people are not exactly comfortable with a lot of these policies. So I'm hoping that international folks will be able to come to the U.S. and be able to experience the hospitality from actual Americans that are hosting these events, that are running these short-term rentals, and will come away with a positive experience and maybe a little bit more context as to what the American feeling is, I guess, about international relations.
No, that's a good point. Often when I've been traveling on a budget, I'm, renting out a room or a guest suite and often get to know the people who are renting the place. And it's a good way to find out a little bit about the people and the culture in the community.
I really am always been very optimistic and bullish about the power of hospitality to unite, and travel in general to align people and their attitudes, and open people's eyes so that we can function more as a united international community, perhaps. Now, how much our policymakers are going to agree with that, that's out of my control. But I do know that short-term rental operators, by and large, are some of the kindest and most hospitable folks that you could be around. All the work that they're doing, I think, is going to be very appreciated.
Well, I think that's a nice positive note to end on. So, Bram, really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.